knowing what we did to Chile, which we're about to do to ourselves if you elect these Milton Friedman freaks. Chile was the laboratory for this kind of economics, for this, voodoo austerity, trickle down, the rich privatization of everything economics. And it failed so miserably that Chile ended up with about 51% unemployment when the Chicago boys went into Chile. I don't know if you know that we were like in league with Pinochet. I don't know if everybody remembers our American history there in Latin America, where we went in there and we overthrew Allende because he was a Marxist. And so we overthrew him in a coup that we orchestrated, and we picked General Pinochet. Milton Friedman from the Chicago School of Economics wrote him love letters and said, okay, you're going to let me have my way with your economy? Can't wait. And everything that the Tea Party people are proposing, cutting taxes, privatization of everything, opening it up to foreign investment, all that stuff was done in Chile. And it took Chile all these years later to try to recover from that. Democracy has just begun to recover in Chile because of what the right-wing Milton Friedman Tea Party types did in Chile. I posted it on my website, the laboratory experiment that was Chile, that Milton Friedman and the conservative, Christine O'Donnell types, the Sharon Angle types. Sharon Angle repeatedly claimed she wanted to privatize Social Security. They were all about the free market economy. You've heard this so often, but you never really drill down on what it is. And speaking of drilling down, that's why all of our focus was in Chile, right? Because they were drilling in the mines, the copper mines, and they got stuck in there, and they were able to rescue them. Well, it was just so interesting to me, the juxtaposition of Chile, free market economy, Chile, free market, that I remembered reading a book by Naomi Klein called The Shock Doctrine. And I remember reading so many things about Chile and Milton Friedman and the free market economy that was the laboratory known as Chile in the 1970s and 80s. I mean, this place for 16 years, Chile, was the laboratory of these free marketeers. It was the place where we, as an American country, decided to do a coup, throw out Allende, and put in our dictator, Pinochet. And that's what we did. And for 16 years, we played with them and turned them into a laboratory for a free market economy. And it failed miserably. It actually ended with the greatest disparity in wealth that any country has ever seen. The rich got super rich. The poor got grindingly poor. No market regulations whatsoever, and a complete and utter lack of democracy and legendary human rights abuses. That's what happened in Chile. The Chicago School of Economics for 16 years had their hands all over Chile, near laboratory conditions. Starting in 73 till 1989, economists trained at the University of Chicago were sent in there, and they totally dismantled, decentralized the entire country of Chile as far as was humanly possible. They privatized welfare and social programs, deregulated their marketplace, invited all this foreign money in, rolled back trade unions, rewrote the Constitution, rewrote the laws of Chile, and all of it happened with the absence of democracy. See, people have wondered what would happen, what would it be like if you got to create a nation based solely on politics and economics. No opposition, no political rivals, no compromise, no morality, only a benevolent dictator.
If this were a dictatorship, it'd be a heck of a lot easier. Just so long as I'm the dictator.
And he would know something about it because this stuff really happened. This is exactly what they did in Chile. 16 years, one of the slowest growth rates of any Latin American country. But inequality in Chile under the Milton Friedman, and in 1982, Milton Friedman, he praised General Pinochet, the Chilean dictator. He wrote, he supported a fully free market economy as a matter of principle. Chile is an economic miracle. Chile was a tragic failure of right-wing economics, and its people are still paying the price for it today. They did shock and awe in Chile, a radical austerity program. Milton Friedman, Arnold Harburger, they gave everything they had to this free market laboratory that they concocted in Chile. I mean, what happened there was just unbelievable. It was unbelievable. The redistribution of wealth was stunning. 1973, the CIA helped General Pinochet launch a military coup in which the former president, Salvador Allende, was killed. Pinochet claims he committed suicide. He was murdered. His new government, with the help of these Chicago boys, practicing their free market economics, they privatized businesses. They did everything that they could. Everything that they could to create this free market economy. And I'm just going to read this to you because this is unbelievable. Pinochet did not have an economic plan of his own. And by 1975, inflation would run as high as 341%. Into this crisis stepped a group of economists known as the Chicago Boys. The Chicago Boys were a group of 30 Chileans who had studied economics at the University of Chicago between 1955 and 63. During the course of their postgraduate studies, they became disciples of Milton Friedman, and he had returned to Chile and completely indoctrinated them in a free market theory. By the end of 1974, they had risen to positions of power in the Pinochet regime, controlling most of its offices for economic planning. The arrangement was a new one in the history of governments. Although Pinochet was a dictator, he turned the economy over to the Chicago Boys, and his only role was to suppress political and labor opposition to their policies. This arrangement was presented to the Chilean people as the removal of politicians and politics from the nation. Instead, technocrats with PhDs would run the economy according to the best theory available. They'd run the government like a business. Those theories, of course, were the neoliberal theories of Milton Friedman. Rational science would decide policy, not political slogans and muddled democracy. In March of 1975, the Chicago Boys held an economics seminar that received national media attention. Here, they proposed a radical austerity program, shock treatment, they called it, to solve Chile's economic woes. They invited some of the world's top economists to speak at the conference, among them Chicago professors Milton Friedman and Arnold Harburger. Unsurprisingly, they gave the proposal their highest praise. The plan called for a drastic reduction in the money supply and government spending, the privatization of government services, massive deregulation of the market, and liberalization of international trade. That's exactly the Republican agenda today, here in this country. Truly, it was formulated by the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, who made the program a precondition for future loans to Chile. The IMF and World Bank would make similar conditions of other developing nations around the world, but none would implement their program as thoroughly and completely as Chile. Interestingly, the World Bank now holds Chile up as an example to be emulated by the rest of the third world. Considering Chile's huge debt and interest payments to the World Bank, it's not difficult to see why. The debt devastation, inequality, and exploitation that the IMF and World Bank bring to third world countries in the name of neoliberal development is another story in itself. Brazil and Peru are two other notable examples, but Chile remains the worst. Shortly after the 1975 conference, the Chile government initiated the Economic Recovery Program, the first phase of shock therapy. Reduce the money supply and government spending. Unemployment rose from 9.1% to 18.7% between 1974 and 75, a figure on par with the U.S. Great Depression. Output fell 12.9%, making this Chile's worst recession since the 1930s. Meanwhile, to prevent the political consequences of such a shock, the Pinochet regime began cracking down on potential opposition leaders. Many just disappeared. The human rights violations of the Pinochet regime will be reviewed below, but suffice it to say, workers accepted the program at gunpoint. By mid-1976, the economy started to recover. From 78 to 81, it achieved what the Chicago boys called the economic miracle. During this period, the economy grew 6.6% a year. By comparison, the U.S. economy usually grows 2.5% a year.